You are utterly useless. It's because of people like you dreaming of marriage that our family is miserable. I wish Andrew had married someone else. How many times have I tried to meet the expectation of my mother-in-law Emily, only to be unsupported by my husband and mistreated in this family? Being treated like a maid just because I'm the wife of their son, and not even getting any money beyond basic living expenses. I have had enough of this family. I will never forgive my mother-in-law and husband for pushing me to this point. I never thought things would turn out this way with my in-laws. My name is Sarah, a 28-year-old housewife. After marrying Andrew, my life took a nosedive when we moved in with his parents. Before we got married, when we went to greet his parents, my mother-in-law casually said, "Once you two are married, we'll need to make room for a bedroom for Andrew and Sarah." I was shocked that I blurted out, "Wait, what? We're moving in? I just wanted to live with Andrew." In hindsight, I should have just let it go and discussed it later. I can't forget the look on her face at that moment. She glared at me, clearly disappointed. I should have called off the marriage then, but I couldn't because I was dreaming of a happy future with Andrew. My mind became preoccupied with how to get along with her rather than sticking to my own ideals. And so I married Andrew and we started living with his parents. For some reason, my mother-in-law handed me 3 sets of white shirts, black pants, and white aprons with frills. "From now on, you'll be in charge of all the housework. Andrew's father and I both work, so we need you to support us. Housework is a job, and that's why I prepared this uniform for you. Wear it and take care of the house." I was so shocked and blurted out, "A uniform? Really?" I was worried that I had again offended her, and I covered my mouth with both hands. Then she sighed and said, "You're not an employee, but I'll give you $300 as an allowance." I was so surprised that I exclaimed, "Only $300 a month?" But she didn't seem angry. "Don't worry, Andrew will inherit our assets, and although you have no right to them, I'll tell him to share them with you." "Inheritance? It's almost in the tens of millions, so don't worry." I counted with my fingers and was amazed. I would be lying if I said I wasn't happy at that moment. But when I thought about it, considering life expectancy, his parents would probably live another 30 years. I realized too late that I'd make more money working than being a housewife living on a $300 allowance waiting for half of an inheritance. After that, I did the housework wearing the uniform mother-in-law had given me just as she had instructed. At first, I felt a bit embarrassed wearing it. It was a full-on maid outfit. Even when I had to go out to buy groceries, I felt self-conscious. I could have worn my own clothes, but changing back and forth seemed like a hassle. Initially, mother-in-law told me to work all day, but I figured it was fine to take breaks since everyone else was at work. However, when mother-in-law returned in the evening, she inspected every corner of the room and scolded me. "Your cleaning is sloppy. What have you been doing all day? I trusted you with this job and you slack off? That's terrible." She then dragged me out of the garden shed, locked me in, and even put a padlock on it. I have a mild case of claustrophobia, so dark and confined spaces make me anxious. I started to tremble with fear and found it hard to breathe. Somehow, I endured it and was let out an hour later, but I was so disoriented that I collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, mother-in-law said, "Hurry up or I'll lock the house," and actually locked the front door and turned off the garden lights. After calming down a bit, I rang the doorbell and knocked on the door, but no one came to help. But instead, Andrew peeked out from a second-floor window and just stared at me. Why won't he help me? Frustrated, I yelled, "Andrew, unlock the front door. This is awful." Andrew replied, "It's your fault for not doing your job properly. Be a sincere wife. Oh, and if you try to escape, next time you'll be locked in the shed all day." And then he closed the window. I had only told Andrew about my claustrophobia. He must have told mother-in-law, who then used it against me. The thought made me incredibly sad. I considered running back to my parents' house, but what if they couldn't protect me? And I ended up locked in the shed again. The thought made my legs tremble and I sat down right there. After a while, the front door opened and father-in-law William, who looked sympathetic, came out.
Sarah, everyone's asleep. Come inside. I'm sorry I couldn't help you sooner. I don't have much say in this house,
he said with a puzzled look. I had always thought father-in-law was passive and agreed with mother-in-law, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Thank you, I said, expressing my gratitude. Father-in-law gave me a troubled smile and said,
For now, come inside.
He told me to sleep on the couch and brought me a blanket, probably his own.
Emily usually wakes up at 7 a.m., so please go outside before then. After that, I think Emily will let you back in,
he said. Okay. I nodded and father-in-law smiled once before saying goodnight and returning to his bedroom. Grateful for father-in-law's kindness, I wrapped myself in the blanket and fell asleep. The next morning, father-in-law woke me up at 7 a.m. and I returned to the yard. Shortly after, my mother-in-law came out and said, So have you reflected on your actions? From now on, you'll do your work properly. If I say it's not good enough, you'll work until midnight. Also, as a punishment for slacking off, you're on an allowance ban for a year. Make me trust you within this year. Stunned by her treatment, I just nodded. Immediately after, I was told to prepare breakfast and lunch and I started working in the kitchen. Kicked out into the yard all night and made to work from morning, it felt like outright bullying. I finally realized, isn't this abuse? I think mother-in-law had assumed from the start that I would only do the bare minimum housework, though she found some dust in a corner as an excuse to lock me in the shed. I believe it was to make me submissive to my in-laws and to ensure that I wouldn't receive any money. Not even receiving the initially promised $300 a month felt unjust. I started thinking about how to get mother-in-law's approval and earn my rightful money. I focused on areas mother-in-law would likely check while trying not to overexert myself. Otherwise, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up. This was because I was on the move for about 12 hours a day, so I didn't think there was any point in complaining if I was caught cutting corners. Even so, mother-in-law would find faults and say things like, You're really useless. Our family is unhappy because someone like you dreamed of marriage, and you should have married someone else. Apparently, she was testing my loyalty to the family, as I heard from Andrew. But Andrew, who only sided with mother-in-law and never defended me, no longer felt like a husband. All love had vanished. Now even when it's just the two of us, I turned my back on Andrew. Seemingly thinking I was still mad about being kicked out, Andrew said,
Are you still in a bad mood? It's your fault for not meeting mom's expectations. If you had done your job, this wouldn't have happened. It's your responsibility too, you know? Cheer up already.
By the way, I recorded Andrew's statement. I pretended to let my true feelings slip and asked, So it's okay to lock me in a shed for an hour, kick me out from night till morning, and threaten to lock me up again if I run? How would you feel if it happened to you? Andrew replied,
Well, I would accept it because I made mom angry.
But I knew he didn't mean it. After all, mother-in-law would never do such a thing to Andrew. It seems Andrew told mother-in-law everything I said the next day. When mother-in-law returned from work, she grabbed my collar and yelled, Have you forgotten you're Andrew's wife? Not only do you reject him, but you also say he should be locked in the shed? I laughed disdainfully at mother-in-law and retorted, I never said that, and Andrew's wife, don't you mean housemaid? Yes, a son's wife is a housemaid who obeys her husband's family. It seems you still need to be disciplined. No dinner for you until my anger subsides. Mother-in-law then took everyone's portion from the large plate, shoved the remaining food at me and said, This is your share, throw it away yourself. The idea of casually wasting food was both unbelievable and unacceptable. This was something I couldn't let slide. What should I do? I thought for a moment and decided to seek help from certain people who came to mind. Pretending to throw away the food, I went to the kitchen, wrapped it in plastic, and put it in a bag, plate and all. I then ran to the front door, flung it open, and dashed out. Mother-in-law noticed and shouted from behind, "Come back, I'll lock you up again." But I didn't stop. I couldn't risk going back now. As I left, Andrew seemed to be entering the house, but I just kept running. I saw him tumble over as our shoulders collided, but I had no time to worry. I had to escape mother-in-law. I reached a station beyond the residential area where taxis were parked. I hopped into one and gave the driver my parents' address. Yes, I had decided to seek help from my parents. I had forgotten that Dad once told me,
"If anything happens, you can always come back."
The timing was perfect to remember this. The taxi driver commented on the delicious smell coming from the roast beef and mashed potatoes I had with me. I laughed it off and told him about mother-in-law's treatment as we drove to my parents' house. For payment, I used mobile barcode payment. Thankful that these days you don't need a wallet if you have a phone. My parents were initially shocked to see me return in a maid's uniform holding a plate of food, but they were happy to see me and said, "Oh, this food looks delicious." I haven't eaten yet because I was told I'm just a maid. I hope it's good. When I said that, my parents' faces stiffened and they asked me to explain. I explained what had happened at my in-laws. I played them the recordings of mother-in-law and Andrew's verbal abuse and told them how father-in-law had helped me. My parents were furious.
"Grab that thing, we're going to their house. We won't let this stand. We'll get you divorced, okay?"
I didn't know what that thing was, but I agreed to the divorce. I was gathering evidence of the bullying for a divorce anyway, so of course. After changing into clothes I had left at my parents', the three of us returned to my in-laws. When mother-in-law opened the door, she yelled, "Where have you been?" but changed her tune upon seeing my parents. Just kidding. It was a prank to see how Sarah would react if her family was angry. My parents weren't buying her poor lie. Dad glared at mother-in-law and said,
"It seems you have been quite a burden on my daughter. May we come in to discuss this?"
Mother-in-law's face turned pale as she reluctantly invited us in. The first to apologize when we were led into the living room was father-in-law.
"I apologize for letting my daughter go through such an ordeal,"
father-in-law said. I had told my parents that father-in-law had helped me, but Dad still looked at him sternly.
"If you were really intent on helping her, shouldn't you have contacted us first? Still, we appreciate your kindness towards our daughter."
As Dad fell silent, mother-in-law began to make excuses. "Young people these days have no resilience. A little scolding and they're heartbroken." At this point, I played the recorded verbal abuse from mother-in-law on my phone. Hearing the shocking words, mother-in-law's face turned pale and she screamed, "Stop it! Stop it! Please stop!" "Is this what you call a little scolding?" Mother-in-law looked down and said nothing more. But the real concerning of mother-in-law was about to begin. Mom pulled some documents from her bag and showed them to the in-laws. "Actually, you may not know this, but I own this house. In other words, I'm the landlord." Both parents-in-law and Andrew were shocked. "What? You're kidding, right?" They couldn't hide their surprise at seeing Mom's name listed as the owner and father-in-law's as the tenant on the lease agreement. Most people never meet their landlords when they rent through an agency. You probably never check the owner's name on the contract, right? So you didn't notice our names when they got married, Mom said, glaring sharply at mother-in-law, who glared back, "How could you not tell us?" I thought it would be inappropriate to establish a hierarchy between landlord and tenant, but you've created a terrible one between your family and your son's wife. If I had known it would come to this, I would have told you I was the owner sooner. You have until the end of next month to move out. I can't stand having people like you in my property." At this, mother-in-law's attitude changed completely. She began to apologize profusely and Andrew followed suit. "I'm sorry. Oh, we won't do it again. We'll take good care of Sarah. Please forgive us, mother-in-law said in a trembling voice, and Andrew turned to me.
Sarah, forgive me. I've always loved you. That's why I was a bit harsh. I'll be kinder from now on.
I then played the recording of Andrew's abusive comments towards me, yelling abuse at me, accusing me, and it's been like that ever since I came to this house. Do you think I can forgive you after hearing this? At my question, Andrew seemed less bothered by the question itself than by hearing his own voice.
I'm sorry. It was my fault. Please, stop playing that.
I can't continue a marital life with you. If you don't want this audio to get out, pay compensation and let's get divorced.
All right.
Andrew nodded repeatedly, perhaps not wanting to hear his own voice anymore. Then I turned my gaze to mother-in-law and said, Emily, you clearly stated that I'm your maid, right? I recorded that too. I'll charge you $10 an hour, and considering I've been working 12-hour days for the past 3 months, that's roughly $10,000. I'll send you an itemized bill later, so please make sure to pay it. Mother-in-law looked up and shouted, I can't possibly pay that. But at that moment, father-in-law interjected.
Pay Sarah. You've done enough to her to warrant that amount. I'm the man of this house, and you'll do as I say.
Father-in-law declared in a strong tone. Everyone was stunned by father-in-law's words, and the room fell silent. Then father-in-law stepped forward again and apologized deeply.
We have caused Sarah so much pain. I am truly sorry.
After that, Andrew and I divorced. Not only did I receive compensation and a share of the assets, but mother-in-law actually paid me for my maid services, which gave me a bit of a financial cushion. Father-in-law left that house and returned to his hometown. Mother-in-law and Andrew said they couldn't find a place to live and stayed until the last possible moment. But once the neighbors found out the truth, they began to avoid them. The neighbors had misunderstood that I was a maid, not a daughter-in-law. When they found out the truth, they saw mother-in-law and Andrew as a twisted family who treated their daughter-in-law like a maid. The rumor spread throughout the neighborhood and even reached mother-in-law and Andrew's workplaces. In the end, they left the house when the deadline came and went their separate ways. I hope they remain alone forever. I returned to my parents' home and started a part-time job at a nearby cafe. I had always wanted to work in a cafe, and now I'm enjoying my time there, getting to know the regulars. I can afford this lifestyle because, like my parents, I also own rental properties. I'm glad I kept that a secret from my in-laws. Otherwise, they might have tried to take advantage of me. My dream of having a happy married life hasn't changed, so I plan to take my time finding the right partner in the future.